My parents didn't come to my wedding because they had a party for my sister the same day. I remember standing in front of the mirror that morning, my hands shaking as I tried to fix my veil. Everyone kept saying how beautiful I looked, how perfect the day was going to be, but all I could think about was the 2 empty seats waiting for my parents. I had called them 3 times already. No answer. I told myself they were on their way, maybe stuck in traffic. Deep down, I knew they weren't coming. It wasn't the first time they had chosen Sierra over me. She was the younger one, louder, prettier, always the center of attention. Growing up, she got everything she wanted. I was the quiet one, the helper, the one they forgot about when things got busy. When I told them Nathan and I were finally setting a date, they smiled politely and said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart." 2 days later, Sierra announced she was throwing a huge birthday party. My parents were thrilled. They helped her plan it for weeks. When I realized both events were on the same day, I thought it was just a mix-up. But it wasn't. They chose her party. In the dressing room, my maid of honor, Lydia, tried to keep me calm. "Maybe they'll come after the ceremony," she whispered as she adjusted my dress. I nodded, pretending to believe her. Nathan's mom knocked gently and said it was time. I looked around one last time, hoping my parents would walk in, smiling, telling me they wouldn't miss this for the world. But the door stayed closed. When the music started, my chest tightened. Everyone stood up. I took a deep breath, holding onto Lydia's arm until I reached Nathan. He smiled at me the way he always did, kind and steady, and whispered, "You look perfect." His words were enough to stop me from breaking down right there. As the vows began, I felt the ache settle deep inside me. I glanced at the empty chairs in the front row, the ones with small white flowers tied to them. They looked like reminders of every moment I'd been second place in my own family. I thought of Sierra, laughing at her party, probably surrounded by the people who should have been here for me. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," I closed my eyes. Nathan kissed me softly, and the guests cheered. For a moment, I tried to let myself feel happy. But behind my smile, a quiet promise was forming, not out of hate, but out of something colder. One day, they'd regret this. One day, they'd know what it felt like to be left out. As Nathan and I walked down the aisle together, his hand warm in mine, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The empty chairs said everything. When I think about my childhood, I see the same pattern over and over again. Sierra in the spotlight, and me standing in the background, clapping for her. My parents always said they loved us both equally, but their actions told a different story. If Sierra got a B on a test, they celebrated with dinner out. When I brought home straight A's, they said, "That's great, Evie. Keep it up," and went back to watching TV. On Christmas mornings, Sierra's pile of gifts was always twice as big as mine. I used to tell myself I didn't care, that I was older and it didn't matter. But when you're a kid, it always matters. She got a new bike. I got socks. She got her first phone at 14. I got mine when I could afford to buy it myself. My parents said I was more responsible, like that was supposed to make up for it. When high school ended, I worked at a coffee shop and saved every dollar I could for college. I remember studying late into the night, sometimes nodding off over my books. Sierra, 2 years younger, spent her time at parties and shopping malls. When she got into college, my parents paid for everything, tuition, dorm, even spending money. When I mentioned my student loans, my mom just said, "You're so independent, Evelyn. We're proud of that." It felt less like praise and more like an excuse. By the time I met Nathan, I had learned not to expect much from them. When I told my parents we were engaged, I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be different. My dad smiled politely. My mom said, "That's nice, honey," and changed the subject to Sierra's new job at a salon. They didn't ask about the date, the dress, or even how Nathan proposed. A week later, Sierra announced she was throwing herself a birthday party. My parents lit up like it was a national holiday. They helped her plan every detail, the decorations, the food, the guest list. My mom called me just to ask if I could help out with the cake. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was just another reminder that Sierra was the one they showed up for. Always. Still, I kept pretending it didn't hurt. I visited home when I could, smiled during dinners, and acted like nothing was wrong. I told Nathan that my parents were just busy, that maybe I was overthinking things. But every time I saw how easily Sierra got their love, a quiet bitterness grew inside me. I never said anything out loud. I didn't want to be the jealous sister, the bitter daughter. So I stayed polite. I stayed calm. But deep down, I knew I was disappearing in their eyes, becoming the daughter they only noticed when they needed something. The forgotten one. The ceremony had ended, and for a while, everything felt like a dream. The garden lights glowed softly, the air was warm, and laughter filled the space. Nathan's family surrounded me with love, his parents hugging me as if I had always been part of them. I smiled and tried to focus on the joy around me, but a small part of me kept waiting for my phone to buzz, for my parents to walk in late with some excuse about traffic or confusion with the time. Every time the door opened, I glanced up, hoping to see them. But it was always another guest, another familiar face from Nathan's side. Lydia caught me looking and gave me a gentle smile. "Don't think about it," she whispered. "You deserve this day." I nodded, pretending I wasn't checking my phone under the table. When the dinner began, Nathan made a small toast. He thanked everyone for being there and called me the calm in his storm. Everyone laughed. My eyes watered, but not just from happiness. I kept glancing at those 2 empty seats in the front, the ones I had saved for my parents. The white roses tied to the chairs looked almost mocking now, like they were meant for ghosts. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed. I felt a spark of hope. Maybe it was them. Maybe they were on their way. But when I looked down, my stomach twisted. It was a group message, a bunch of photos from Sierra's birthday party. There she was in a glittery dress, laughing with friends. In one photo, my mom and dad were dancing behind her, holding drinks, smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. The room suddenly felt smaller. My hands shook as I tried to keep my face straight. Lydia leaned closer, asking if I was okay, but I couldn't speak. I excused myself quietly and slipped into the restroom. The moment the door closed, I broke down. My chest hurt so much I could barely breathe. The sound of music and laughter outside felt distant, like it was happening in another world. Lydia found me there a few minutes later. She didn't ask questions. She just wrapped her arms around me. I cried into her shoulder, trying to get it all out. "They didn't even call," I whispered. "Not even a text to say congratulations." She rubbed my back and said softly, "You don't need them today. You have people who love you right here." Nathan came in later, knocking gently before stepping closer. He cupped my face, his eyes full of concern. "You have me," he said simply. Something in his voice steadied me. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and nodded. As we walked back out together, I forced a smile. The anger inside me wasn't loud. It was quiet, sharp, and deep. I didn't say it out loud, but I promised myself that someday, my parents would understand exactly what they had done. The morning after the wedding, the house smelled like coffee and warm pancakes. Nathan was in the kitchen, flipping eggs with his usual calm smile, while a few of our friends sat around the table, laughing softly about the night before. I tried to keep up with the small talk, smiling when people congratulated us again, but inside, I still felt hollow. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo of my parents dancing at Sierra's party. When the guests finally left, I started cleaning up the dishes, trying to distract myself. That's when my phone buzzed. For a moment, I froze. The caller ID said Mom. I stared at it, my heart thudding in my chest. Nathan looked over from the sink, his expression gentle. "You don't have to answer," he said quietly. But I did. I needed to hear what they had to say. "Hi, Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady. Her tone was cheerful, too cheerful. "Hi, sweetheart. We wanted to call you yesterday, but things got so busy. You know how Sierra's party was already planned, and we couldn't just cancel it. We figured you'd understand." Understand. The word made my stomach tighten. She kept talking about how lovely the party was, how much fun everyone had, as if she hadn't missed the biggest day of my life. I waited for an apology, but it never came. Instead, she said, "We'll make it up to you, okay? Maybe we can take you and Nathan out to dinner next week." For a second, I almost laughed. Dinner. As if that could erase what they'd done. I looked at Nathan, who was watching me with quiet worry. He could hear my mother's voice from where he stood, light and clueless. I spoke calmly, but my words came out colder than I expected. "Don't worry about it, Mom. You made your choice. I hope Sierra's party was everything you wanted." There was silence on the other end. Then she said, a little nervously, "Evelyn, you don't have to sound like that." "I'm fine," I said softly. "Really. I just need to go now." I hung up before she could answer. My hands were steady. For the first time in my life, I didn't cry after talking to her. Nathan came over and wrapped his arms around me, but I barely moved. Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't angry in a loud way anymore. It was quiet, clear, and final. I was done trying to earn their love. From now on, I'd make my own way, and someday they'd see exactly what they had thrown away. After that phone call, I stopped trying. There were no more messages, no more holiday visits, no more checking in to see how they were doing. I didn't make a big announcement about it. I just quietly stepped away. I changed my phone number, deleted the group chat with my family, and stopped answering when they called from different numbers. Nathan supported me without asking questions. He knew this wasn't about anger anymore. It was about peace. We moved to a new city a few months later. It felt like starting over. The air felt different, the streets unfamiliar but full of possibility. Nathan found work quickly, and I focused on growing my freelance design business. At first, it was just small projects, logos, posters, a few website designs. But I worked hard, putting in long hours and teaching myself everything I didn't already know. Nathan would bring me coffee late at night and remind me to take breaks. I rarely did. As time went on, things started to shift. Clients began recommending me to others. My work got noticed, and soon I had more projects than I could handle alone. I hired 2 assistants, then 4. Eventually, I registered my own company. Seeing my name on the business license made me tear up a little. For once, I felt proud of myself. Not for something my parents had approved of, but for something I built entirely on my own. While my life grew stable, Sierra's began to crumble. I didn't go looking for information, but small updates reached me through relatives. Her job at the salon didn't last. She partied too much, missed shifts, and eventually got fired. Then came the credit card debt, the unpaid rent, and the crying calls to my parents for help. I didn't feel happy about her struggles, but I didn't feel sorry either. Everyone makes choices. She had always been the center of their world, and now, that world was falling apart. My parents tried to reach out once in a while. They sent letters through mutual friends, saying they missed me and wanted to talk. I didn't respond. Every time I thought about calling them back, I remembered the empty seats at my wedding. That image stayed with me, not out of pain anymore, but as a reminder of what I'd overcome. 2 years later, my company landed a major contract with a national brand. It was the kind of deal that changed everything. I stood in my new office, surrounded by my small but loyal team, and thought about how far I'd come. Nathan kissed my forehead and said, "You did it, Evie." I smiled. I had cut the ties that once held me down, and in their place, I built something solid. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had built my own life, one they couldn't take credit for, and one they could never ignore forever. It started with a letter. My mother's handwriting was neat and familiar, and for a moment, my chest tightened just seeing my name written by her again. Inside, she wrote about how proud they were of me, how they had heard great things about my business. She said they missed me and wanted to talk, that family is everything, and life was too short to hold grudges. I read the letter twice, then set it aside. There was no anger this time, just a quiet emptiness. A week later, my father called Nathan's phone. He never used to call Nathan directly, so that told me how desperate he was. Nathan answered, then handed me the phone with a look that said I didn't have to talk if I didn't want to. I hesitated but took it. My dad's voice sounded older, softer. He told me they thought about me every day, that they regretted not being there for my wedding, and that Sierra was going through a rough time. He said they wanted to visit. I listened in silence. When he stopped talking, I said, "I'm busy right now. Maybe some other time." My tone wasn't sharp, just distant. I could hear the disappointment in his breath before he said goodbye. After I hung up, Nathan looked at me carefully. "You could give them another chance," he said quietly. "Sometimes people really do change." "I know," I said. "But sometimes they only change when they lose something they can't replace." That night, I couldn't sleep. The words "family is everything" kept repeating in my head. They had said that before, always when it suited them. Back then, it meant doing whatever Sierra wanted. Now, it meant trying to pull me back in after realizing what they had lost. A few days later, my phone rang again. This time it was Sierra. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice was shaking. She said she'd been evicted from her apartment and didn't know what to do. She mentioned how Mom and Dad were so stressed, how everything felt like it was falling apart. I sat there listening quietly, my heart steady. I didn't feel happy about her pain, but I couldn't deny the dark satisfaction running through me. Not because Sierra was struggling, but because the truth had finally hit them. They were seeing what life looked like without the daughter they took for granted. For once, they were the ones on the outside, and I didn't rush to let them back in. Years later, I finally opened my new design studio with Nathan. The space looked exactly how we had dreamed, bright, modern, full of plants and sunlight. Everything reflected our style and our hard work. On the day of the grand opening, we decided to invite everyone we knew, and out of politeness, I included my parents and Sierra. I wasn't sure if they would come, but I wanted them to see, even if only for a moment, what they had missed. When my parents arrived, I could tell they were uneasy. Their smiles were stiff, their eyes darting around like they weren't sure where to sit or what to say. They realized, maybe for the first time, that my life had moved on without them. It wasn't just a studio or a business. They were seeing me thriving, fully in control of my own path, something they had ignored for so long. I watched them, feeling a quiet satisfaction. I didn't need to say anything. They could see it all. Sierra walked in behind them, quieter than I had ever seen her. She didn't try to hide it, but she looked smaller somehow, like the weight of the past had finally caught up with her. She avoided my eyes, kept her head down, and stayed near the back of the room. I didn't approach her, and she didn't approach me. There was nothing to be said that could erase what had happened, but somehow her silence said more than words ever could. When it was time for my speech, I stepped up to the small podium Nathan had set up, took a breath, and looked at the crowd. I didn't glance at my parents, and I didn't search for Sierra. I spoke to everyone who had believed in me when no one else did. I thanked my mentors, my friends, the strangers who encouraged me to keep going, and Nathan, who had never once doubted my vision. Every word flowed with calm confidence. There was no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet, undeniable proof that I had made it on my own terms. I noticed my parents' faces as I spoke. Tears had formed in their eyes, and their hands trembled slightly. They realized that I had become someone they barely knew, someone successful and independent. My heart didn't race with forgiveness. It stayed steady. The speech wasn't just a thank you. It was a statement. It was success spoken softly, but firmly, in a way that left no room for the past to creep back in. Every sentence felt like a reminder that I had survived, grown, and thrived without them. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. Nathan smiled at me, proud and a little amazed. I felt a rush of warmth, knowing that all the effort, all the late nights and hard choices had led to this. My parents tried to approach me afterward, but I shook hands politely, nodding, and excused myself to talk to others who had supported me. Sierra lingered near the door, hesitant, unsure if she belonged. I didn't call her over. She stayed quiet, and I let it be. By the end of the night, the studio buzzed with excitement and laughter. People admired the space, asked questions, and congratulated me. I walked through the crowd, feeling calm and proud. This night wasn't just a celebration of the studio. It was a celebration of everything I had built for myself. I had invited them, yes, but I hadn't needed their approval. And that, more than anything, felt like victory. After the event, I stepped outside to get some fresh air, the cool night air brushing against my face. I hadn't expected anyone to follow me, but my parents were there, their faces pale and wet from tears. They rushed toward me, voices shaking, words tumbling out too fast to catch at first. They were crying, begging me to forgive them. "We were wrong, Evelyn," my mother said, clutching my father's arm. "Sierra's party, it was a terrible mistake. We lost sight of what really mattered." My father nodded, tears streaming down his face. "We didn't see how much we hurt you." He broke off, sobbing. I stayed quiet. I listened to every word, the weight of years pressing down in that moment. Their voices were full of regret, full of the kind of sorrow that comes too late. I wanted to say something, but the words I felt ready to speak weren't angry. They were simple, cold, and honest. Finally, I looked at them and said, "You made your choice that day. I learned to make mine." The words hung in the air, and I could see my mother's knees tremble. She collapsed onto the ground, sobbing harder, the shame and regret spilling out in a way that left her breathless. My father just stood there, unable to move, his hands trembling at his sides. I didn't step closer. I didn't hug either of them. Sierra stood nearby, quiet at first, watching everything. For the first time, her expression softened. She came forward slowly, her voice small but clear. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I really am. I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have done all of that." It was the first time she ever admitted it. The first time her words carried real truth rather than arrogance. I looked at her and felt a rush of something I hadn't felt in years, relief, warmth, and a little forgiveness. I stepped forward and hugged her tightly, holding her like the sister I had always wanted her to be. She clung to me, letting the apology finally land, letting the hurt from the past start to fade between us. But when I turned back to my parents, the distance remained. I could see their pain, their shame, and a desperate hope in their eyes, but I didn't step toward them. I didn't need to. Their mistakes had shaped a wall between us, and that wall wasn't going to disappear with a single apology. I felt no anger, only a quiet, steady understanding that some gaps couldn't be crossed so easily. I stayed there for a moment, watching them cry, while Sierra held my hand, looking up at me with tentative trust. The night felt heavy, but not dark. I had made my choice. I had chosen to protect myself, to allow love where it was deserved, and to let the rest remain where it belonged, outside in the cool night air. Eventually, I pulled away from Sierra, letting her stand beside me. We walked back inside together, leaving my parents on the sidewalk. Their cries faded behind us, but I didn't feel the need to turn back. I had learned what mattered. I had chosen my family in the way I always should. Weeks later, a package arrived at my studio. I didn't recognize the handwriting at first, but when I opened it, I saw it was from my mother. Inside was an old family album, worn at the edges, filled with pictures from my childhood. Along with it was a note in her familiar handwriting that made my chest tighten. "Will always regret not being there." I flipped through the album slowly, tracing my fingers over the photos of birthdays, holidays, and school events. Each picture reminded me of moments they had missed, of laughter they hadn't shared, of support they hadn't given. I felt a flicker of sadness, but it was quiet, controlled. Years of distance had taught me how to hold my own heart steady. At the very back of the package, I found something else. A photo, carefully cut out from a larger picture someone else had taken. It was me in my wedding dress, smiling shyly, radiant in a moment that had meant everything to me. My parents had not been there, not for the wedding, and here was their apology, hidden in the edges of someone else's memory. I held it in my hands for a long time, feeling the weight of what it represented. Their regret was real, even if it had come too late. I didn't cry, and I didn't feel anger. Instead, I felt a calm understanding. Their regret wasn't mine to carry, and their apologies weren't necessary for my happiness. I realized my peace didn't come from making them feel guilty or proving myself. It came from no longer needing them. I had built my life, my love, my home, and my studio with Nathan, and that was enough. That was everything. I went to my desk and pulled out a frame. I placed the wedding photo inside it carefully, then took a newer picture of Nathan and me, standing in our studio, smiling together, the walls behind us filled with our work. I set the two frames side by side. One captured a moment they had missed. The other captured a life we had built on our own. The contrast was sharp, almost telling a story by itself. I stood back and looked at them, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The wedding photo reminded me of absence and regret, but the studio photo reminded me of presence, love, and achievement. I didn't need to explain it, and I didn't need to feel anything toward my parents beyond acknowledgement. Their feelings were theirs, my life was mine. Nathan came up behind me, smiling as he rested his hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, feeling a small smile creep onto my face. "I am," I said. "I'm more than okay." For the first time in a long time, I felt completely free. Their absence had shaped me, but it hadn't broken me. Their regret had arrived too late, and that was fine. I didn't hold it against them, but I also didn't need it to matter. My life, my family, my joy. These were things I had chosen, and they were real, solid, and mine. I placed the frames together on the shelf, side by side. One was a memory of what I had missed, the other a proof of what I had gained. I stepped back and let myself just look at them, breathing in a quiet satisfaction. My peace didn't come from revenge, from anger, or from needing them to feel sorrow. It came from knowing I didn't need them to feel complete. I had everything I wanted, and it was enough. Years later, I found myself at my parents' house. My father had fallen ill, and I had come to see him. I didn't rush or panic. I walked through the familiar front door with calm in my steps, carrying a quiet strength I had built over the years. Nathan was with me, holding my hand, steady and reassuring as always. Inside, the house looked much the same, but I noticed the little things differently now. The faded curtains, the old furniture, the pictures on the walls. I remembered how I used to live here, how their attention had been elsewhere, how their absence had left a gap I had learned to fill myself. But today, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. I was here because I wanted to be, not because I owed them anything. I sat with my father, talking softly, asking how he was feeling. I listened to him, offered water, adjusted his blanket. My words were kind, my gestures gentle, but there was distance in the way I moved, a line I didn't cross. I cared, but I wasn't giving them the part of me that had been lost years ago. I didn't need to prove anything. I just needed to be present for what mattered now. My mother hovered nearby, watching us quietly. I noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes kept darting to me as if she wanted to say something, but wasn't sure if she could. I spoke politely, answered her questions, smiled when she smiled. Everything was measured, calm, unshakable. I wasn't looking for forgiveness. I wasn't hoping for apologies. I was simply here. As I got up to leave, I could feel the weight of the moment settling over us. My father's eyes followed me, tired but thankful. My mother walked to the doorway with me, and for a second we both stopped. She leaned close and whispered, almost as if to herself, "I wish we'd come to your wedding." I turned to her, meeting her eyes with a faint smile. I didn't hesitate. I didn't argue or explain. I just said, "Me too." There was no anger in my voice, no accusation, only the truth. It wasn't bitterness or revenge. It was a simple acknowledgement of what had happened and what could never be changed. I could see the regret in her face, the sadness that had finally settled in, and I felt a strange peace. That moment didn't erase the past, but it didn't need to. I stepped away from the doorway and back down the path to my car. Nathan squeezed my hand gently, and I smiled at him, feeling the warmth of our life together. Every step felt lighter, freer. The years of hurt, disappointment, and absence had shaped me, but they no longer held power over me. I had built my own life, full of love, happiness, and achievements. That was my revenge, not anger or confrontation, but living well after betrayal. As we walked away together, hand in hand, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That chapter was finally closed. I carried no resentment, only quiet strength and a heart fully my own. I had lived my truth, and that was more than enough.